The mining station floated in space like a dying metal beast. Its lights flickered as explosions rocked the outer sections. Smoke poured from broken hull plates, while enemy ships circled like hungry wolves. Commander Talia Corvin pressed her blue-scaled hand against the tactical display. Red dots swarmed across the screen, each one representing a Vorthan attack ship. Her own forces showed as green dots, but there were so few of them left. The battle for Meridia Station had been going on for 3 months, and they were losing badly. "Report," she said to Lieutenant Beck, her voice tired but steady. "The Vorthans broke through Defense Grid 7, Beck replied, his reptilian features showing worry. "They destroyed Platform Delta an hour ago. Our outer ring is collapsing." Talia closed her eyes for a moment. Meridia Station was home to 10,000 miners and their families. The Coalition fleet was still 2 days away, and their evacuation ships could only carry a few hundred people at a time. If the station fell, all those innocent lives would be lost. The Vorthans were not known for showing mercy to civilians. "How many enemy ships?" she asked. 62 capital ships, plus fighters and support craft. They have us outnumbered 6-1. Beck looked at his readings again. "Commander, they're moving siege cannons into position. They plan to crack the station open like an egg." Through the command center's windows, Talia could see the massive Vorthon dreadnoughts positioning themselves. Their dark hulls bristled with weapons, and their red engines glowed like angry eyes. The Vorthans were reptilian creatures much like her own people, but where Altarians valued honor and protection, the Vorthans lived for conquest and destruction. "What about our reinforcements?" she asked, though she already knew the answer. "The Third Fleet is still in hyperspace. Admiral Ross sent word they're pushing their engines as hard as they can, but—" Beck didn't finish the sentence. They both knew the Coalition ships would arrive to find nothing but wreckage and bodies. A young technician at the communications station suddenly looked up. "Commander, I'm getting a strange signal. It's using an old frequency." "What kind of signal?" Talia asked, walking over to the comm station. It's human, ma'am, but the language is different from what we have in our files. It sounds more advanced somehow." Talia frowned. Humans were considered a minor species by most of the galaxy. They lived on a few scattered colonies and kept to themselves. Their technology was primitive, mostly chemical rockets and basic energy weapons. "What could humans possibly do against a Vorthan invasion fleet? Put it through," she ordered. The speaker crackled with static, then a rough male voice came through clearly. "Meridia Station, this is Colonel Davis of the Human Colonial Marines. We're inbound with the 15th Drop Regiment. Hold your positions. Help is coming." Beck's eyes went wide. "Commander, there are no human ships on our sensors." "Keep scanning," Talia replied, then spoke into the communicator. "Human vessel, this is Commander Corvin of Meridia Station. We appreciate any assistance, but you should know we're facing overwhelming odds. The Vorthans have over 60 capital ships." There was a pause. Then the human's voice came back, and Talia could hear what sounded like laughter in the background. "Copy that, Commander." 60 ships, you said? Sounds like a fair fight." The communication ended, leaving the command center in stunned silence. Beck looked at his sensors again, then shook his head. "Still nothing, Commander. No human ships anywhere in the system." Suddenly, the space around Meridia Station began to shimmer. Reality seemed to bend and twist as 12 sleek ships dropped out of hyperspace. They were unlike any human vessels in the Coalition database, where human ships had been bulky and crude. These were sharp and deadly, their dark hulls seeming to absorb light itself. "Those are definitely human signatures," the communications officer reported. "But their technology readings are off the charts. These ships are more advanced than anything we've seen." The human ships moved with predatory grace toward the station. They didn't head for the main Vorthon fleet or try to engage the larger ships. Instead, they came straight for Meridia Station, running silent except for that one transmission. Admiral Thack, commanding the Vorthon fleet from his massive flagship, barely noticed the new arrivals. His attention was focused on the final assault. In his arrogance, he saw 12 small ships as nothing more than annoying insects. "Sir, we have new contacts," his tactical officer reported. "Irrelevant," Thack growled, his forked tongue tasting the air. "Continue the assault. Nothing can save them now." Back on Meridia Station, Talia watched the approaching human ships with a mixture of hope and confusion. "Are they going to attack the Vorthon fleet?" "No, ma'am," Beck replied, studying their course. "They're heading directly for us. It looks like they plan to dock." "Dock? In the middle of a battle?" Before anyone could answer, alarms began blaring throughout the station. The Vorthons had begun their final push. Heavy assault mechs, each one 20 feet tall and bristling with weapons, were cutting through the outer hull. Coalition Marines fought desperately to hold them back, but their energy weapons barely scratched the enemy armor. "All sections report heavy casualties," Beck said, his voice grim. "We're losing ground fast." The human ships had reached the station. Now, but instead of docking, they did something unexpected. Bay doors opened along their hulls, and small objects began launching toward the station. At first, Talia thought they were missiles, but the trajectory was all wrong. "What are those?" she asked. The communications officer looked up from his station, excitement in his voice. "Commander, I'm picking up human life signs in those objects. They're drop pods." "Drop pods? In the middle of a space battle? It gets stranger, ma'am. I'm reading massive energy signatures from each pod. Whatever those humans are carrying, it's powerful." The first pods slammed into the station's hull with tremendous force, their impact sending vibrations through the entire structure. More followed, dozens of them, each one punching through the outer armor like it was made of paper. Then, something remarkable happened. The reports of enemy breakthroughs suddenly stopped. The Vorthon advance, which had seemed unstoppable just minutes before, ground to a halt. "Commander," Beck said, staring at his tactical display in amazement, "the enemy forces in Sector 7 have gone silent, all of them." "What do you mean, silent?" "I mean they're not moving, not shooting, not transmitting. It's like they just stopped." Through the chaos of battle, a new sound reached the command center. It was the distinctive whine of human weapons, but these didn't sound like the primitive firearms in their database. These weapons had a deeper, more deadly tone. "Commander Corvin," came the human voice over the communicator again, calm and professional. "Colonel Davis here. My boys are on your station now. We'll have this mess cleaned up shortly. Sit tight and let us work." Talia looked around her command center at the faces of her crew. For the first time in months, she saw something she had almost forgotten: hope. Outside, the battle for Meridia Station was about to change forever. The medical bay of Meridia Station had become a battlefield. Dr. Emma Wells crouched behind an overturned surgical table as Vorthon shock troops poured through the breach in the outer wall. Their massive forms, covered in thick armor scales, moved with deadly purpose as they cut down the coalition defenders. Emma clutched her medical scanner, watching the life signs of wounded soldiers fade one by one. She had been treating injured Marines for hours, but now the enemy had found them. The evacuation was impossible with Vorthans blocking every exit. A young Altarian soldier, barely old enough to hold a rifle, crawled toward her position. Green. Blood seeped from a gash across his chest. "Doctor, they're coming this way. You need to hide." Before Emma could respond, the wall behind them exploded inward. A Vorthon warrior stepped through the smoke, its red eyes scanning for targets. The creature stood 8 feet tall, its clawed hands gripping a plasma rifle that could melt through steel. It raised the weapon toward the wounded soldiers. Then the ceiling caved in. Something dark and metallic crashed through the medical bays. Roof, with tremendous force. As the dust cleared, Emma saw a figure unlike anything she had ever encountered. It stood in powered armor that seemed to absorb light, making it difficult to focus on directly. The armor was sleek and functional, with none of the bulky design she associated with human technology. The armored figure moved faster than anything human should be able to move. In one fluid motion, it raised a weapon and fired 3 shots. The Vorthan warrior's armor, which had shrugged off Coalition energy weapons, cracked and shattered. The massive alien collapsed without making a sound. "Medical personnel, identify yourselves," came a voice from the armored figure. It was clearly human, but there was something different about the tone. This wasn't the voice of someone afraid or desperate. This was the voice of a professional doing their job. Emma slowly raised her hand. "Dr. Emma Wells, Coalition Medical Corps. I have wounded here who can't be moved." The figure turned toward her, and Emma caught a glimpse of the face behind the helmet's visor. It was a woman, maybe in her 30s, with calm eyes that had seen too much combat. "Sergeant Martinez, Human Colonial Marines. Ma'am, we're here to get you out." "How many wounded?" 12 soldiers, 3 civilians. "The Vorthans have the corridors blocked. We're trapped." Martinez spoke into her helmet communicator. "Command, this is Wolf Leader. Found survivors in Medical Bay 7. Need extraction route for 15 non-combatants." The response came immediately. "Wolf Leader, take maintenance shaft Delta 7 to Junction 12. Overlord has that route cleared." Emma stared at the human soldier. "How do you know our station layout?" Martinez smiled grimly. "Ma'am, humans have been studying Coalition facilities for years. We know this station better than most of the people who live here." She turned to the wounded soldiers. "Can any of you walk?" The young Altarian soldier tried to sit up. "I can try." "No need," Martinez replied. She activated something on her armor, and Emma watched in amazement as the powered suit's strength increased dramatically. Martinez easily lifted the wounded soldier as if he weighed nothing. "Doctor, gather your medical supplies. We're moving in 30 seconds. As Emma packed her emergency kit, she heard sounds of fighting from the corridors outside. But these weren't the sounds of Coalition forces being overwhelmed. These were the sounds of Vorthans being hunted. Martinez led them through passages Emma didn't even know existed. The human moved with absolute confidence, her weapons ready, her armor sensors constantly scanning for threats. Twice they encountered Vorthan patrols, and both times Martinez eliminated them before Emma even knew they were there. "How many of you are there?" Emma asked as they reached a safer section of the station. "Enough," Martinez replied simply. "Ma'am, I need you to know something. What you're seeing today, what humans are doing here, it's going to change everything. The galaxy thinks we're primitive. That's about to change." They reached a large junction where Coalition forces had set up a temporary command post. Emma was amazed to see that the defenders, who had been retreating all day, were now organized and confident. Human soldiers worked alongside Altarian Marines and Centauri engineers as if they had trained together for years. A tall human in Colonel's insignia approached them. His armor was similar to Martinez's, but marked with command symbols. His face was weathered and scarred, the face of someone who had fought in too many battles to count. "Dr. Wells, Colonel Davis, Human Colonial Marines, are you injured?" "No, sir, but I don't understand what's happening. Your people are fighting like they know exactly what the Vorthans are going to do." Davis nodded. "Doctor, humans have been watching the Vorthans for a long time. We've studied their tactics, their equipment, their psychology. We know how they think." He gestured to a tactical display showing the station layout. "They fight with overwhelming force and predictable formations. They've never faced an enemy that fights dirty." Emma looked at the display. The red markers, representing Vortan forces, were no longer advancing. Instead, they seemed confused, scattered. "What did you do to them?" "We gave them something they've never experienced before," Martinez said, removing her helmet to reveal short black hair and determined eyes. "An enemy that refuses to play by their rules." Davis pointed to different sections of the display. "Vorthans. Expect frontal assaults and defensive lines. We give them ambushes from impossible angles. They expect energy weapons and plasma guns. We use kinetic projectiles that punch through their armor. They expect their enemies to retreat when outnumbered. We advance. But there are only 12 of your ships, Emma protested. How can you possibly match their numbers? Numbers don't matter if you're fighting smarter, Davis replied. Every human on this station is worth 10 Vorthans, not because we're stronger or faster, but because we think differently. A communications officer looked up from his station. Colonel, Admiral Thack is demanding to know who we are. The Vorthon fleet is repositioning to target our ships. Davis grinned, and Emma saw something in that smile that made her understand why the Vorthons were confused. It wasn't the smile of someone winning a battle. It was the smile of someone who had planned for this exact situation. Tell Admiral Thack that he's about to learn why humans don't stay down when we're knocked down. We get back up, and we hit harder. He turned to Martinez. Sergeant, are your people ready for Phase 2? Yes, sir. All squads report objectives. Secured. The Vorthans are pulling back to regroup. Perfect. That's exactly what we want them to do. Davis activated his communicator. All units, this is Overlord. Begin Phase 2. Show them what humans do when we're angry. Emma watched the tactical display as human forces throughout the station began moving with coordinated precision. They weren't just fighting back anymore. They were hunting. Colonel, she said quietly. What happens now? Davis looked at her with those weathered eyes. Now, Doctor, we remind the galaxy why humanity survived everything it threw at us. We don't just win battles. We make sure our enemies remember why they should have left us alone. Outside, the sounds of battle were changing. The Vorthons, who had been confident predators just hours before, were becoming the prey. And somewhere in space, Admiral Thack was about to discover that 12 human ships could be more dangerous than 60 alien ones, if those ships carried the right crew and the right attitude. The battle for Meridia Station was far from over, but for the first time in months, the outcome was no longer certain. Private Rico Santos felt his drop pod heating up as it screamed through the station's artificial atmosphere. The metal walls glowed red-hot while the pod's computer counted down in Betty's calm voice, the AI that all colonial Marines knew and trusted. 10 seconds to impact, Private. Vorthon heavy infantry detected in landing zone. Recommend immediate aggressive action. Copy that, Betty, Rico replied, checking his weapon one final time. The rifle in his hands looked nothing like the primitive firearms other species expected from humans. This was a weapon designed by a species that had learned to fight dirty and win ugly. All devils sound off. Devil 2, ready to raise hell, came the voice of Corporal Kim Park. Devil 3, locked and loaded, added Private Alex Thompson. Devil 4, ready to dance, finished Lance Corporal Maria Gonzalez. The pod slammed into the station's hull with bone-jarring force. Shaped charges blew a hole through 3 feet of reinforced metal, and the 4 Marines poured out into a corridor filled with surprised Vorthon shock troops. The Vorthons were massive creatures, each one weighing over 400 pounds, and covered in natural armor scales. They carried plasma rifles that could melt through tank armor. They had been advancing steadily through this section, overwhelming coalition defenders with superior firepower and brute strength. They had never fought humans before. Rico moved like liquid lightning, his powered exoskeleton multiplying his speed and strength. His rifle spoke 3 times, and 3 Vorthons dropped with holes punched clean through their thick armor. Behind him, his squad spread out in a pattern that made no sense to traditional military thinking, but had been perfected in the brutal urban warfare of humanity's colonial expansion. The Vorthons tried to respond with their usual tactics. They formed up in a defensive line and brought their heavy weapons to bear. It was exactly what Rico had been trained to expect. Kim, high left. Alex, low right. Maria, with me through the middle, he ordered, his voice calm despite the chaos around them. The humans didn't charge the Vorthan line or try to outshoot them. Instead, they used the station itself as a weapon. Kim ran up the wall using her suit's magnetic grips, firing down at enemies who couldn't angle their weapons high enough. Alex rolled under the Vorthon fire and came up behind their position, through a maintenance hatch that shouldn't have existed on their tactical maps. Maria and Rico went straight through the center, but not in the way the Vorthons expected. Rico's suit had been modified with equipment that other species considered crazy and impossible. He activated his jump jets and flew over the enemy line while dropping grenades that exploded in patterns designed to cause maximum confusion rather than maximum damage. The Vorthons found themselves fighting enemies who came from above, below, behind, and through walls they thought were solid. Their formation collapsed into chaos as they tried to track targets that moved in 3 dimensions, and used tactics that no military academy in the galaxy taught. "This is Devil Leader," Rico reported as his squad regrouped in the now silent corridor. "Sector 12 cleared. No friendly casualties." "Copy. Devil Leader," came Colonel Davis's voice. "Impressive work. Move to support Coalition forces in Junction." 7. Rico led his squad through passages that would have been impossible for larger alien species to navigate. Humans were smaller than most galactic species, and the colonial marines had turned this supposed weakness into an advantage. They could fight in spaces where other species couldn't even fit. They reached Junction 7 to find Coalition forces pinned down by a Vorthon heavy weapons team. The aliens had set up behind energy shields and were methodically cutting down anyone who tried to advance. The Coalition commander, a veteran Altarian sergeant, was preparing for a desperate frontal assault that would likely cost dozens of lives. "Sergeant, this is Rico Santos, Human Colonial Marines. Hold your position." The Altarian looked confused. "Human? I thought your people used chemical weapons and metal bullets." "We do," Rico replied with a grin. "Among other things. What happened next would be talked about in Coalition military academies for decades." Rico's squad didn't attack the Vorthon position directly. Instead, they disappeared into the station's infrastructure like ghosts. Kim found a power conduit that fed the enemy's energy shields. Her suit's tools, designed for rapid battlefield engineering, cut through the heavily shielded cables in seconds. The Vorthon shields flickered and died. Alex accessed the station's gravity controls from a maintenance panel. Suddenly, the Vorthons found themselves in 0 gravity, while the humans, trained for 3-dimensional combat, moved through the air like deadly angels. Maria had found the ventilation system. She used it to position herself directly above the enemy position, then dropped smoke grenades that filled the area with a fog that blocked Vorthon vision, but was transparent to human suit sensors. Rico coordinated the final assault. "Coalition forces, advance on my mark. Stay low and follow our targeting markers." The Altarian sergeant watched in amazement as the human soldiers painted targets with laser designators that appeared on his squad's helmet displays. They moved forward in perfect coordination with soldiers they had never trained with, guided by humans who understood battlefield dynamics better than officers with decades of experience. The Vorthons never had a chance. Blinded by smoke, thrown off balance by 0 gravity, and facing enemies who came from impossible angles, they were overwhelmed in minutes. "How did you do that?" the Altarian sergeant asked as the position was secured. "Sergeant, we learned to fight on worlds where everything was trying to kill us," Rico explained. "Hostile environments, dangerous wildlife, and enemies who outnumbered us 100 to 1. We survived by being smarter, faster, and more adaptable than anything that wanted us dead." Alex was studying a tactical display. "Rico, looks like the Vorthons are pulling back to the main hub. They're probably planning to make a stand there." "Let them," Rico replied. "The colonel said Phase 3 starts once they regroup. That's when things get really interesting." Kim looked confused. "Things get more interesting than this?" Rico's grin widened. "Kim, what we've been doing so far is just clearing out the small stuff. Phase 3 is when we show the Vorthans what humans do when we get serious about ending a fight. He activated his communicator. Command, this is Devil Leader. Junction 7 secured. Coalition forces intact. The Vorthans are retreating to the central hub as predicted. Excellent work, Devils, came Colonel Davis's voice. All squads report similar success. The Vorthans are doing exactly what we hoped they would do. Sir, what happens in Phase 3? There was a pause, then Davis's voice came back with a tone that made Rico remember why he had volunteered for the Colonial Marines in the first place. Phase 3, Private, is when we stop playing defense and start playing offense. The Vorthans want to know who humans are and what we're capable of. We're about to give them a demonstration they'll never forget. Rico looked at his squad, seeing the same anticipation in their eyes that he felt in his chest. They had trained for this moment for years, preparing for the day when humanity would have to prove itself against the established powers of the galaxy. You heard the man, Devils. Time to show the galaxy what humans do when someone threatens innocent people. As they moved toward their next objective, Rico couldn't help but smile. The Vorthans thought they were facing desperate defenders making a last stand. They had no idea they were about to face an enemy that had turned desperation into an art form and last stands into victory celebrations. The real battle was about to begin. Admiral Thak studied the tactical display aboard his flagship with growing confusion. The holographic representation of Meridia Station showed his forces in retreat, something that should have been impossible. His shock troops were the finest. Warriors in the Vorthan Empire equipped with the best weapons and armor. They had conquered 17 star systems without a single defeat, yet somehow 12 primitive human ships had turned his certain victory into chaos. Report, he growled to his tactical officer, his forked tongue tasting the air for signs of weakness. Admiral, our ground forces are regrouping in the station's central hub. They report facing an enemy unlike anything in our military databases. The humans fight with tactics we cannot predict. Thak's claws clicked against his command chair. Impossible. Humans are a minor species. Their technology is centuries behind ours. How many human soldiers are on that station? Estimates vary. Sir, our troops report seeing them everywhere, but actual numbers are unclear. They move through the station's infrastructure in ways that our forces cannot follow. Then we will end this differently, Thak decided. Prepare the devastation for ramming speed. If we cannot take the station, we will destroy it completely. The devastation was Thak's most powerful dreadnought, a massive ship designed to crack open fortified positions. Sending it on a suicide run into Meridia Station would vaporize everything within 1,000 kilometers, including his own ground troops, but it would deny the coalition their victory. On Meridia Station, Colonel Davis watched the enemy movements through sensors that had been quietly installed throughout the Vorthon fleet over the past few hours. The human ships carried more than just drop troops. They carried intelligence specialists who could infiltrate enemy systems without being detected. Sir, the Vorthans are preparing their dreadnought for a ramming attack, reported Major Torres from the communications station. The devastation is moving into position. Davis nodded calmly. Right on schedule. Signal Phase 4 to all teams. Commander Talia Corvin, who had been watching the humans work with growing amazement, looked up sharply. Phase 4? Colonel, what exactly are you planning? Something that's never been attempted before, Commander, Davis replied. We're going to capture a Vorthan dreadnought while it's on a collision course with your station. The command center fell silent. Even by human standards, the idea was insane. That's impossible, Talia said. The ship will be moving at attack speed. Boarding it would be suicide. Davis smiled that same confident smile she had seen before. Commander, impossible is just another word for nobody's tried it yet. He activated his communicator. All Reaper units, this is Overlord. Target is the devastation. You have 12 minutes to complete the mission. Copy, Overlord, came a calm female voice. Reaper leader beginning approach. This should be fun. Through the station's observation windows, Talia watched something that defied every principle of space warfare. The human ships broke formation and accelerated directly toward the massive Vorthon dreadnought. Instead of attacking it with weapons, they moved to intercept its course. "They're going to ram the dreadnought?" Beck asked, his voice filled with disbelief. "No," Davis replied. "They're going to board it." The lead human ship, moving with impossible precision, matched the dreadnought's course and speed. Docking clamps extended from its hull and attached to the enemy vessel's armor plating. Within seconds, cutting torches began burning through the dreadnought's hull. 8 minutes to impact, Torres announced, tracking the countdown. "Whatever they're doing, they need to do it fast." Inside the devastation, Captain Lisa Torres led her Reaper team through corridors filled with confused Vorthon warriors. The ship was on a suicide run, and most of the crew had been evacuated to smaller vessels. Those who remained were preparing for glorious death in service to the Empire. They weren't prepared for humans who fought like demons in their own home. Torres moved through the ship with the confidence of someone who had studied its design for years. Human intelligence had been watching Vorthon military construction for decades, learning their patterns and weaknesses. Every door, every corridor, every security system was familiar territory. "Navigation control is 3 decks up," she told her team through helmet comm. "We have 6 minutes." The Reapers moved like shadows through the massive ship, avoiding large groups of enemies and eliminating smaller ones with silent efficiency. They weren't there to fight a glorious battle. They were there to complete a mission that would change the course of galactic history. They reached the navigation center to find it heavily defended by Vorthon Marines in powered armor. The reptilian warriors had barricaded themselves behind energy barriers and were prepared to fight to the death to protect their ship's final mission. 4 minutes to impact, came the countdown in Torres's helmet. "Too much time to fight through," reported Sergeant Wilson. "We need another way." Torres studied the ship's schematics in her helmet display. Human intelligence was thorough, and she knew things about Vorthon design that the Vorthans themselves had forgotten. "There's a maintenance shaft that leads directly to the navigation core," she said. "It's too small for Vorthons to use, but humans can fit." "Of course there is," Wilson replied with a grin. "Humans always find the back door." 2 minutes later, Torres emerged from the maintenance shaft directly behind the navigation console. The Vorthan guards were still focused on the sealed entrance, waiting for a frontal assault that would never come. Her rifle spoke 6 times, and 6 guards collapsed. The navigation core was hers. "Overlord, this is Reaper Leader. We have the navigation system. Beginning course correction now." "Copy, Reaper Leader. You have 90 seconds. Torres's fingers flew over the Vorthon controls. The ship's computer resisted her commands, but human hackers had developed techniques that could break through alien security systems. She wasn't just changing the ship's course. She was turning it into a weapon against the Vorthon fleet itself. 30 seconds to impact, came the countdown. "Course correction complete," Torres reported. "The devastation is no longer heading for Meridia Station. It's heading for the center of the Vorthan formation." "Outstanding work, Reapers. Now get out of there." Torres and her team ran for the extraction point as alarms blared throughout the ship. Behind them, Vorthon officers were discovering that their suicide weapon had become a guided missile aimed at their own fleet. Admiral Thak watched in horror as his most powerful ship changed course and accelerated toward his command formation. He ordered his ships to scatter, but the massive vessels couldn't maneuver quickly enough. The devastation, now under human control, swept through the Vorthon fleet like a scythe through wheat. The collision and explosion that followed lit up space like a newborn star. When the light faded, more than half of the Vorthon fleet had been destroyed or crippled. The remaining ships, their formation shattered, and their command structure in chaos, began a desperate retreat toward the outer system. On Meridia Station, The command center erupted in cheers as the tactical display showed enemy ships fleeing in all directions. Commander Talia Corvin stood next to Colonel Davis, watching the impossible victory unfold. "How did you know they would use the dreadnought?" she asked. "Because we studied them, Commander. We learned their psychology, their tactics, their standard responses to different situations. When you understand your enemy completely, they become predictable. But the risk, if your people had failed," Davis looked at her with those weathered eyes. "Commander, humans don't calculate acceptable losses. We calculate acceptable risks to save lives that matter. Your 10,000 civilians mattered more than our comfort zone." As the human ships prepared to depart, Talia realized she was witnessing something historic. This wasn't just a military victory. This was the moment when humanity announced itself to the galaxy as a force that could not be ignored. "What happens now?" she asked. Davis paused at the door of the command center. "Now, Commander, the galaxy learns that humans don't just survive impossible odds. We turn them into opportunities, and we never forget who our friends are." The battle for Meridia Station was over, but the war for humanity's place in the galaxy had just begun. The evacuation shuttle drifted through the debris field that had once been Admiral Thack's mighty fleet. Pieces of Vorthon warships tumbled slowly in the vacuum, their twisted metal catching the light of distant stars. Inside the shuttle, the few surviving officers of the Vorthon Empire sat in stunned silence. General Korax, the highest-ranking survivor, stared out the viewport at the wreckage of his career. 3 months ago, he had commanded the most feared invasion force in known space. Now he commanded nothing but shame and the duty to report an impossible defeat to the Vorthon High Command. "How many ships?" he asked his aide, though he dreaded the answer. 17 vessels escaped, General. We lost 45 ships, including the devastation. Estimated casualties are over 200,000 troops." Korax closed his eyes. "And the humans?" "Intelligence suggests they lost fewer than 50 soldiers in the entire battle, sir." The numbers made no sense. By every measure of military logic, the Vorthons should have won. They had superior numbers, better armor, more powerful weapons. Yet they had been defeated by an enemy they had barely considered worth studying. "General, we need to prepare our report for the High Command," the aide said carefully. "What should we tell them about the humans?" Korax was quiet for a long moment. "Tell them that everything we thought we knew about humans was wrong. Tell them that we have awakened something that was better left sleeping." Back on Meridia Station, the celebration was just beginning. Coalition forces that had been preparing for death were now embracing life with the joy of the unexpectedly saved. In the medical bay, Dr. Emma Wells treated the wounded with tears of relief streaming down her face. The casualties had been far lighter than anyone had dared hope. Commander Talia Corvin walked through the station's corridors, seeing the damage, but also seeing her people alive and safe. The repair crews were already working, and the civilian population was emerging from the emergency shelters. Children who had hidden in fear for months were laughing again. She found Colonel Davis in the observation lounge, standing before the large windows that looked out into space. The human ships were preparing to depart, their mission complete. They had appeared like ghosts and would disappear the same way, leaving behind only questions and the proof that the galaxy had changed. "Forever." "You're leaving," Talia said, joining him at the window. "Our job here is done," Davis replied. "The Coalition fleet will arrive soon, and you'll have proper reinforcements. Your people are safe." "But why?" Talia asked the question that had been burning in her mind since the humans first arrived. "Why did you come? Your people owe us nothing. Humanity has been ignored by the Coalition for decades." Davis was quiet for a moment, his weathered face reflecting in the transparent metal. "Commander, let me tell you a story about humanity. About 50 years ago, we were just starting to expand beyond our home system. We were weak, primitive by galactic standards, and we knew it. But we had something that most species in the galaxy had forgotten. What was that? We remembered what it was like to be afraid, to be outnumbered, to face impossible odds with nothing but determination and the knowledge that giving up meant innocent people would die. Talia nodded slowly. The coalition has grown comfortable. We've been the dominant power for so long that we forgot what it meant to fight for survival. Exactly. When you sent out that distress call, it wasn't just heard by your fleet command. It was heard by every human monitoring station in known space. And when humans hear that innocent people are in danger, we don't calculate the odds. We don't worry about cost or risk. We just come. A young human soldier approached them, her armor marked with the insignia of a sergeant. It was Martinez, the Marine who had saved Dr. Wells and her patients. She saluted Davis crisply. "Sir, all teams are aboard and ready for departure. Casualty report shows 8 wounded, 0 KIA. Outstanding work, Sergeant. Tell the crews they've earned their rest." As Martinez left, Talia marveled at the calm professionalism of the human forces. They had just accomplished something that military historians would study for centuries, yet they treated it as simply another day's work. "Colonel, what happens now? When word of this battle spreads, the entire galaxy will want to know about human capabilities." Davis smiled, but there was something sad in his expression. "That's the problem, isn't it? For 50 years, humanity was ignored because we were considered weak. Now we'll be feared because we're considered strong. Neither extreme tells the real truth about who we are." And what is the truth? The truth is that humans are exactly what we've always been. We're the species that doesn't know when to quit. We're the ones who turn disasters into opportunities and defeat into victory. We don't fight because we're strong. We fight because it's the right thing to do. Through the observation windows, they could see the human ships beginning to move. Their dark hulls caught the station's lights as they prepared to jump to hyperspace. Soon, they would be gone, leaving behind only the evidence of their intervention. "Will we see you again?" Talia asked. "Commander, humanity has been watching the galaxy for a long time. We've been learning, growing, preparing for the day when we might be needed. That day came today, but it won't be the last time." Davis turned to face her directly. The Vorthons were just one threat among many. There are others out there, other empires that think strength means taking what you want from those who can't defend themselves. When that happens, when innocent people need help, and the odds seem impossible, that's when humans show up. He extended his hand in the human gesture of friendship. "The Coalition has new allies now, Commander. We don't ask for much in return. Just remember that the galaxy is bigger than any one species, and sometimes the smallest player on the board can change the entire game." Talia grasped his hand, feeling the strength in his grip and understanding that this was more than just a military alliance. This was the beginning of a new era in galactic politics. "Thank you, Colonel, for everything." "Thank you for giving us a chance to prove what we could do," Davis replied. "Humanity has been waiting for this moment for 50 years. The chance to stand up and be counted among the defenders of freedom." As Davis left to join his departing forces, Talia remained at the observation window. She watched the human ships accelerate toward the edge of the system, their forms growing smaller until they disappeared into hyperspace. The space around Meridia Station was quiet now, empty except for the slowly dispersing debris of the Vorthon fleet. But the galaxy itself was no longer quiet. News of the battle would spread quickly, carried by merchant ships and communication, networks to every corner of known space. The story would grow in the telling, but the basic facts would remain the same. A minor species called humanity had appeared from nowhere and turned certain defeat into impossible victory. Some would fear this development. Others would welcome it. But everyone would remember the day when 12 human ships proved that courage and determination could triumph over overwhelming odds. In the depths of space, the human fleet jumped to hyperspace, carrying with them the knowledge that their long isolation was over. Humanity had announced itself to the galaxy in the most dramatic way possible, and there would be no going back. The battle for Meridia Station was over, but the story of humanity's rise among the stars had just begun, and somewhere in the vast darkness between the worlds, other threats watched and waited, not yet understanding that the galaxy now had new guardians who would never surrender, never retreat, and never abandon those who needed their help. The age of human intervention had begun.